Oh, that's great.
Well, friends of Atando Libros, hi. We are going to start this talk about courage, my love, about some interesting things about the Second World War, the partitions in Rome, and we have a pleasure to talk with Kristin Beck, that is the novelist and former teacher with a master in teaching for Western Washington University, and your first novel. It was a pleasure to have you in Atando Libros. Welcome, and thanks for your time to talk with us.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm pleased to be here.
Well, we are talking a little bit about the theme of your novel. Some of the historical novels talks about the Second World War, but very few of them talk about Rome, about Italy. I read that your inspiration it's about your grandma. Could you tell us more about your inspiration and the figure of your grandmother?
Sure. So when I was growing up, I was really close to my grandparents, and grandmother was a nurse in World War II for the Canadian Army. And so I grew up hearing all of her stories about that. She spoke about going to England first and working there. And then after D-Day, she came over to Normandy shortly after the first waves of fighting on the beaches there, took care of soldiers there. And then she followed the Canadian Army up throughout Europe. So she went to Amsterdam and into Belgium. And she actually married my grandfather in Ghent, Belgium, during the war at a cathedral there. And he was an American officer, which is how we ended up living in the United States. So my grandma would tell me all of these stories as I was growing up about what that was like. And it made me aware of the fact that there were many untold women's stories about World War II. And when I was a kid, there weren't very many stories out there about women in World War II. I feel like now that's changed quite a bit. We are telling quite a bit of those stories, but when I was young, there were not very many novels about women's roles in the war. And I always found that interesting because I had grown up hearing these stories and I knew that women did amazing things and played powerful roles during this time. So I always was kind of on the lookout for interesting stories about what women did during that time. And then when I was in my 20s, I lived in Italy 2 different times. I went there as a university student, and then I went back as a teacher. So I had quite a bit of time there and became very interested in World War II history in Italy because I had all through my upbringing, I had heard so much about the war that when I started to learn about Italy's role during the war, I was really fascinated because it was another area of World War II that there weren't very many stories about that I had come across. So when I set out to write this book, I was curious about kind of those 2 untold stories, both about what it was like in Italy during World War II and the role that women played during that time.
Yeah, I think if when I read about your grandma, your grandma was so tough because she stayed in the D-Day, was the crucial day when the Allies planned a lot of ways to take us on the fight against the Nazis. No, D-Day was a symbolism of freedom, and it's so a huge cost for all the lives, no? And it's so difficult, I imagine, for all the people that went there and to fight and to help as your grandma, all the soldiers, no? Because it was so huge, and it's very difficult, no? To arrange the beaches. And I admire that kind of women. And you tell us about 2 strong as your grandma in this novel, about Francesca and Lucia. What do you think about this kind of women that doesn't have the similar or equal situation, but they share a hope to be free.
Mm-hmm. Well, I definitely thought about my grandma a lot when I was writing these two characters, even though they definitely had different roles that they played in the war. My grandma is a Canadian nurse, and then, of course, Lucia and Francesca as Italian partisans. They had different experiences, but what I felt was common between them was that strength that I always saw in my grandmother. She was somebody who was um, pretty unflinching in the face of challenges, and she had faced enormous challenges in her time there. So she was somebody who, when she was faced with a challenge, she would take care of it. And so when I was writing these two characters, I thought they needed to be those kinds of women who, when things became difficult, they would rise to the occasion. And then as I did lots of research about the real female partisans in World War II, what I found over and over again was stories of women like that, women who had been, they were women who had been raised to be homemakers and have traditional female roles. And then when they joined in the resistance, they had totally different roles than they had been prepared for all their lives, and they rose to that occasion and were incredibly strong. So the stories of Lucia and Francesca also came from lots of research about the real women partisans of World War II Italy. Oh, I can't.
Thank you. Sorry.
Oh, no.
And in the last part, when the Allies won, these two women have some different roles, no? One in politics, and the other was a lawyer, no? And
Mm-hmm.
they continue, no, all the mission that they want to have the women rights, no, to fight for the women rights. And it's very interesting, but because in another novels we didn't know what happened with these characters after.
Mm-hmm. I always like to know what happens to the characters afterwards. So that's part of why in my books, there will almost always be a hint about their future toward the end of the book. Um, and when I was thinking about what they would go on to do in their lives, I thought not only about their characters and what would suit them, but I also researched women who were partisans who then became various things after the war. And there were lots of women that joined Parliament, and that was the first time that had ever happened. And there were women who did things like become lawyers and various other professions that have been closed to women before that. So I thought hard about what Lucia and Francesca would be suited for and thought that those were the roles that they would probably choose.
We thank you because you close the history of them so nice. And I'm going to let Edna ask another things. I hope you have a lot of questions about it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, you.
Hi.
Thank you very much for your time and for the chance to be here together with us, talking
You're
about
so
your
welcome.
novel. We enjoy it a lot. I was talking with Angie when we started reading the book that I love all the dramatic stories and all the historical fiction, and I love those kind of stories. You know, those where you can see all the development of the characters, and we saw that in both of your two principal characters, and we enjoyed that. We also get angry with Nana Colombo. We also cry with Mateo, and yeah, we hate her a little bit. Then she made us change our mind a little bit. We also talk about that, no, that those times were very, very different from now, and the education and the way of living and the governments and the politicians and politics and everything, it was quite different from now. So well, we understand Anna Colombo, but we suffer with her a little bit. So well, I really really enjoyed your book, and well, I have two questions that I always love to ask to the authors, because I think that it helps me to understand more the story and the book. And which was your favorite part during all your writing process with this novel? Because it's your first book, so I suppose it was quite an experience, no?
It was. Do you mean my favorite part of the writing process or my favorite part of my favorite scene to write in the book?
Both the writing process and that scene that maybe you were like, oh, this is quite difficult, or maybe this is quite easy.
Okay, yeah. Well, in the writing process, I love the first draft. I love when you're sitting down and creating the story, because in the writing process, there are lots and lots of stages of the process, and I actually like all of them. I enjoy editing as well. But I really love that first draft where you're sort of sitting down and the story comes to life, because I find that oftentimes as we're writing the story, I always start with an outline. Every writer is a little bit different that way, but I start with an outline, and then the story tends to take on a life of its own. And it doesn't always follow the outline that you originally set out with. And that's actually kind of a magical thing when that happens, when the story takes a life of its own and it's sort of carrying you along with it in a way that you didn't even foresee. I always find that to be really exciting, and that's kind of the magic of writing for me. So that would be my favorite part. And then as far as scenes go, this sounds kind of funny to say that I loved writing this scene, but I think I loved writing it because I knew it was going to be a really difficult scene. And then that's when Francesca is captured, and she has to go through that terrible torture. And that was very much what happened to people when they were captured. That was true to history. And I knew that that was what was going to happen in the story. And so as I was leading up to it, I was dreading writing that scene. I felt like it was going to be really difficult. And I have kind of a soft stomach for such things. And so I was worried that I would have a hard time with it. And then as I wrote it, I felt that the scene sort of transformed from the terrible things that were going on into something actually quite beautiful, because that's where she finds her strength. And her strength partially comes from her relationship with Giacomo. And he kind of visits her in that scene, as you recall, and that's where she realizes that she is strong enough to not be conquered by her enemies. So, and that all came out in the sort of magical way that writing sometimes does. I don't think I went into the scene knowing exactly what would happen or exactly how it would play out. And then that was what came out of the end of that writing session. And so in some ways, that might be one of my favorite scenes of the novel.
And one of the scenes more difficult, no?
Exactly. I didn't expect it to be a favorite scene, but I do think that sometimes in these stories, the most difficult parts often yield the times when the characters change or when they transform or realize things about themselves. And so sometimes the most difficult scenes end up being the most beautiful scenes as well.
Yeah, we talk about the scene that we loved how it ends, no, with unconquerable. That's you just need one word to know how she was getting stronger and stronger, even she was suffering, no. So yeah, we love that part. We also felt very sad because we thought back then that Giacomo was dead, and we were like, oh no, he's dead, what's going on? But well, we enjoy it a lot. And well, my other question is also related a little bit, well, no, it's also related to the death of one of the characters. Did you plan to kill Carlo from the very beginning of the book, or there was like, I will kill him, but maybe I will not?
That's a good question. I did plan from the beginning. I didn't plan that he would survive the story. But then as I was writing the story and he became a real character, I definitely questioned myself and was tempted to have a different outcome for him. So it's kind of funny. It was another one of those moments where the story takes on a life of its own. And I regretted that he ended up not surviving the story. But I did think that for the purpose of the story and also for the to sort of adhere to the truth of the times, I felt like that was the correct outcome for him. Although I was sad to lose him.
Yeah, I know. I felt really, that scene when they are going upstairs to the roof and trying to go away, and they are, I was like, God, please, I don't want him to be killed. But yes, as you mentioned, I think that well, kind of sad actions and deaths, well, they're part of the history of the world. No, there were a lot of deaths during the World War. So I think that it's also giving to the story reality. No, so like this is a honest book, and that's how things happened back then. So I think that even we suffer it, we enjoy it a lot because it's a realistic book, I think. So yeah, I think, well, that's are my three questions, well, two questions. But well, I enjoy it a lot, your book. I really was like beating my nails, and I was telling Angie that, oh no, I'm going to cry, because from the very beginning, when we started in the first chapters, there was already, excited scenes, and there was everything like, oh god, another scene. So I really enjoy it, and thank you for your time, and also Angie for organizing this.
Oh, you're
No.
so welcome. Thank you so much. I love to hear. It's the best thing to hear that people have enjoyed your book. So thank you so much.
Thank you. And I have to say about the two of the scenes that are you talking about, you make this this scene about torture so subtle, because we don't be focused on the torture, because you didn't describe a lot. You only suggest, no? And the rest could be in our minds, just like Alfred Hitchcock do, that says that the viewer or the reader have most of the time more worst imagination or are so bad, no? But you center these scenes in the what do you say, to recover the humanity, no? To recover this strong, the force to be struggle, no, in this difficult time. And I love the way that you do this to scenes that Edna talk right now.
Thank you. I think that's a really lovely way to put it too. That because I think during World War II, in these terrible things that happened, these terrible tragedies, the humanity of people rose up and people rose above the tragedy that they were living through. And I think that that is part of what makes these stories so inspiring, that even when they are sad and tragic, we see the humanity and the courage of people, and it's inspiring. And that's, I think, why we continue to tell these stories. So that's a lovely way to put it.
Thank you. And we have the other side. Moma Colombo was our second nightmare, because we read another book that has a same Moma, but what is the same, a nightmare. I think that Moma Colombo has this minute, no, to rethink about his daughter, no, and to try to save her. But in the last part of the novel, I read, and I can't believe it, that the parents wants to continue about the fascist, no, thing. I don't believe. Well, I think that sometimes for adult people, it's so difficult to change or to avoid, no, all the things that they believe. That's the case about the fathers, but you put this two characters in a situation that it happened for a lot of Germans and other people that are collaborationists, and they struggle about their beliefs. It was so, I don't know how to say, no? Ridiculous.
That's part of what I found so interesting about Italy during that time, was that people had to decide what they were going to believe and change their beliefs. And I think it's very difficult sometimes for people to change their beliefs. Sometimes it's more comfortable to keep believing something, even if it's wrong, than to admit that you've made a big mistake. And I thought about that quite a bit with Nona Colombo, because she had sacrificed her sons to fascism, and how difficult that could be as a parent to have to decide that that was wrong, that you'd made a huge mistake, and then to change your belief system because of that. So that I thought she was a very difficult character.
Yeah.
Yeah, easy to dislike Nana Colombo. But I found her interesting as well, because I did think as a parent, I was interested in how that would affect her decisions, that she was a fascist, a lifelong fascist, but that she was also a mother, and that when she was ultimately faced with losing another child, what would she choose? And I had her choose her child, even though she was such a difficult person.
Yeah, and you say in the last part of the book that Italy was a country divided by fascist past, no? And we saw that the parents run to Bavaria, no? With the hope that they are going to be safe, but we know that some of them, they are going to be killed, or they are going to go to camps, no? To work and loses everything, no?
And they were fleeing north to where the war lasted longer. If they'd stayed in Rome, in the story, that they would have been liberated, but they ended up following the war. So, yep, anything could have happened to them in that scenario. And Italy was very divided during, particularly that year. Some historians call it a civil war during that time, because there were the fascists who had been fascist for 22 years and wanted to keep the country that way. And then all the people who resisted it. And it did become a country divided, for sure, during that time.
Yeah, Rome was a different case, no? In Europe, if we compare between England or France, no? I tell Edna that I think it's a very interesting situation about Rome, because if we compare between France has a leader, no? France de Gaulle, and they pursue about the freedom with this leader, huge leader, no? And for England, well, the King George, and from USA, Roosevelt, no, they have leaders, they have a huge image, and then all the people are around, no, around him to fight against the Nazis. But in Rome, they have the leader Il Duce, and I think that they could be just like an orphan, no?
Yeah, that's an interesting way to think about it, for sure. Because when they lost Mussolini, or when Mussolini was deposed, they didn't have a government, and so it was a tremendous upheaval in Rome. And at that point, they ended up signing an armistice with the Allies, but then of course the Germans came and occupied the country. So there was a kind of a power vacuum, and a situation where it was chaos in the country after Mussolini was deposed.
Yeah, and you show us this period for the people that are waiting so long for the lies. It remembers me like another book, like to Waiting for Godot, no? The Romans are waiting and are fighting against, but they didn't know certainly when the lights are going to arrive, no? And when they are going to be safe. And they try to fight against when all the things that they need or they have, no?
And it also was very difficult because the expectation was that the Allies would be there so much sooner than they actually arrived. People thought they were just around the corner always, and then for a long time they were actually very close when they landed in Anzio. It was so close they could hear the fighting, and yet it took a very long time for them to actually gain access to Rome and liberate the city. So I do think when I was writing it, I thought about how difficult that would be, to feel that at any time things could change and then to not have them change and have to wait, and that difficulty of trying to predict what would happen next and all the uncertainty that people must have felt during that time.
Yeah, well, it's very interesting, no, to more about this situation, because the time between D-Day and the V-Day, it's a very strange, no, time for the Romans, because the lies when they arrived to France was so hard for them, no, to conquer France. They loses a lot of soldiers, and then I imagine in Rome they are waiting for them, but they didn't know exactly what happened in France, no, and in other places, no, and they are going to fight against the Nazis. And you show us so great these situations, and we travel with your book, and we convert in partitions.
Oh, look at that. Oh, that's great. That's one of the pictures that I looked at.
Yeah. And Aglae was the other partition with the soldiers. And we have our passport. That's Edna passport. We have our passport, Laura, and Aglae, and me.
Oh, that's fun. That's great.
Yeah, you make us have a great trip to know more about this situation and the other things about. And Laura couldn't stay here right now, but I'm going to say that she loves a lot your novel, and I'm looking for the questions. Oh, sorry, sorry. Laura says, thank you for this beautiful book, and we are going to ask you the next book that you are planning.
Okay, so the next book comes out in about 1 year from now. It comes out September of 2022. And we've just decided on the final title. It's going to be titled The Winter Orphans. And it is about children who were refugees from Austria and Germany during World War II who ended up in southern France. And there were Swiss women, real Swiss women, who worked for the Red Cross. And the story is about how those women saved the children who were refugees during that time.
Yeah, we read another book, the Book of Lost Names, that it talks about the free zone near Switzerland. No, and this part was a very conflict zone, because the Swiss says, I don't want to have any fight with the Germans, but if you are going to stay there, I don't see you, I don't hear you. No, it's very complicated in this time. No,
it was very complicated, and Switzerland ultimately ended up not accepting refugees. They closed their borders. And that's a big part of what this story is about, is the fact that the refugee children needed to be evacuated from France, and so they ultimately had to illegally cross into Switzerland, and they needed help from these Swiss women to do that. But it was a very complicated time.
Yeah. Well, we are going to read your next novel. I promise you when they are published. And the other question for Laura was, why do you choose Italy for Courage, My Love?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, it was partly because I had a history of living there, and I love everything about Italy. And so I felt like in writing a book there, in setting a book there, I would have a chance to spend a lot of sort of mental time in Italy, researching and reading, and I got to practice some Italian, which was nice. So that was part of it. Part of it was just because I really love the country, and then also a big part of it was because I stumbled upon stories of these female partisans in Italy during the time, and I was just fascinated by how brave and strong they were. And as I delved into those stories and read more deeply about them, I just felt like that was a story I wanted to write. So that also led me into Italy for this story.
Thank you. And in this novel, you write some words in German and Italy and English. I love because I was studying for a long time German, but for me it's so difficult. I didn't speak well. I only read a little bit, but I realized that you combine these three languages, no? And it was so wonderful.
Oh, thank you. I don't speak any German, but I do have a very good friend. She was actually my roommate when I lived in Italy, and she's German. And so whenever I use German in my books, I have her check all of my German to make sure that I've gotten it correct. And then I used to speak Italian, I think, fairly well. I don't know that I would say that now because it's been a long time. It's been years since I've had a chance to really try. But it was really fun to sort of dive back into Italian and realize that I still remembered some Italian, which was also really nice.
Was so nice. And we are talking another character that it could be Hans Bergman, the bad guy. We hate him too.
I hate him too. Yeah. He was also a character. He's fictional, but I did a lot of reading on the German leaders that were in Rome during that time, and sort of dove into their stories. And I felt like because I was creating a fictional character in Lucia, I didn't want to use a historical German leader that was there at the time because I was creating this relationship between the two of them. So I sort of made a combination character out of all of those real people that lived during that time in Hans Bergman. And I do think that the real men who were occupying Rome at the time were just as bad as he was. Lots of real life bad guys there for sure. But yeah, he was really a pretty terrible character.
Yeah, I don't know, when I was reading about Hans Bergman, I remember the character that wins Oscar for the infamous bastard, the Nazi, Christian. I forgot the last name, but I imagine him in your novel.
That's probably pretty accurate. Yeah. I actually haven't seen that movie, but I would imagine that that's probably an accurate.
Kristin loves to do the Nazi characters. I saw him in two pictures, Infamous Bastard and another, and he was so awful. A great actor, great actor. Well, and the last, do you have another question, Satna?
Well, it was just a quick question that I was thinking now that I was hearing you about the movies and all that. If you had a chance to make a movie about your book, which actor would you choose to do it?
The
Oh, that's
cast.
a good
The
question.
cast.
Gosh, I don't know. I'm not very good with pop culture. I
We
tend to
helped you. We helped you.
you you could probably yeah, you could probably do a better job than I could with it. But
Yeah,
that is a
that
great
would be
question.
a really, really great movie. No, if we enjoy reading the book, I think it will be also good to see it because you can have a face to the characters. No, so and my other question it was about Mateo. I love the character of Mateo because I must to admit it made me nervous because I was like, God, I hope he will survive. Please, I need him to survive. I was telling Angie that when I'm reading a book and there are kids involved, usually I felt like more, I don't know, if more sensitive about the topic. I'm like, please, I need them to survive. I don't want them to be dead there in the story. So how difficult it was to you to develop this character, because at the end, well, it was a child that you need to keep that innocence and that naivety, in the character, and how do you do that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I feel the same way when I read. If there's a child in danger, I always have a lot of trouble with that. Um, so it was difficult to write a child and know that he would be in danger because of the circumstances of his life. Um, when I wrote that character, my daughter was around that same age, and that was really helpful because I had a child in the house who was a similar age, and so I could sort of look to her for things about how he might act, how he might respond to situations, but of course his fictional personality is very different than my own daughter's. So I had to think about that too, like what kind of a child might he be, and how what might he be like because of the circumstances of his upbringing. And when I was thinking about that, I thought, well, he needs to be somebody who is adaptable, as I think people who are living through traumatic situations often are. He would become used to some of the difficulties. And so that was definitely something I thought about as I was writing his character as well. But even though you become used to your circumstances, if you're a little kid, you're still a little kid. And so I tried to keep him authentic throughout, that he would still play and still imagine things, and still be a little boy, even though he was living in this very serious time.
Yeah, we read it, and I think it's one of our favorite characters because it keep us. I think it gave to the story hope, that there will be an end and there will be better days coming. So, well, that's all.
Oh, thank you.
Well, unrelated about Mateo and Carlo, I like the scene when Carlo teaches how to climb. For me, it was a metaphor about the dad teaching about to to reach all the obstacles, to fight against them. No, I love this part when Carlos says, if you have problem, you have to do this and that. No, it's a very beautiful way to tell him you have to fight for your all the things that you are going to have after this. No.
That's a lovely way to look at it, for sure. Yeah, I thought about when I was writing that scene, I thought about what that would be like what kind of thing might they do together, and might Carlo teach him that he hasn't learned as a child growing up in a big city. And that was the thing I thought of because, his father would have grown up in the countryside, climbing trees and things like that. And so I thought that was a nice way for him to connect with his son. And then also, I think you're absolutely right. It's a great metaphor for what Mateo will have to do in his life, going forward, especially because we all know that his father eventually isn't by his side.
Yeah, but I don't like that Lucia wants to wait after work to say, Mateo, this is your father, because in war we are going to do the things right now. We don't know if we are going to survive the next day. No, the only thing that I didn't like it's the waiting time for Lucia.
He probably should have told him. Yeah. I actually thought about that when I was writing it, because I tried to think, well, how would she think about this and what would she do? And then I thought, I want her to really believe that they have a future together, which of course makes it more difficult when they don't. But I wanted her to believe that he would survive, and that they would be a family, and that would be the time. But yes, of course, we regret when he no longer survives. We regret that they never got to know each other as father and son.
Edna has the same spirit as you, because I was talking about it, and Edna says, we are giving hope about the future, no?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I was telling Angie that was the only hope that Lucia could have to survive war, no? That there will be a tomorrow, there will be a chance. No, I need to prepare myself and my brain to understand, and there will be a hope. So yeah, we talk about that our last session, that it was a hope action, no?
That was how I saw it too. And then I also thought a little bit about, like, as a mother, whether I would want to introduce something such a huge thing to my child's life when it was already so difficult. And so I kind of thought, I don't know, I think I probably would have waited as well, just because I would have wanted to keep things as stable as possible for Mateo. But of course, it ends up being the wrong choice.
Yeah.
It was a mistake.
Well, I think that I want to have the truth, because I am a journalist, and one of my instincts says the facts, no, the reality. You have to do right now. We don't have time. Well, but it's nice. Well, we are going to find this chat, and Edna, you have another thing to say?
No, it's just thank you for writing this beautiful book. We enjoy it a lot. We Angie and I are, we love all the historical fictions and novels, and I don't know, we sometimes joke that maybe in another life we lived back then, and that's why we enjoy a lot.
There's the photo. There's the photo.
That's
so
right.
we enjoy it, and we are ready for your next book. For sure, we are going to read it. And well, thank you for your time and for being here with us.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you so much. It's been so nice to chat with you both.
Oh, well, we are going to say thank you very much to write this great novel, to show us a different part of the World War, and to show this kind of women that fight against all the evil and all the things that are wrong in this era. And you show us a different kind of way of this work, about Rome, and we enjoy a lot Mateo. We love it, and we hate Moma Colombo. What's the second character we hate in this year? The first place was the Mamusha of the Book of the Lost Names, and the second was your Moma Colombo.
Oh, that's funny. Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It was wonderful to talk with you.
Thank you so much. And in the final, we are going to take a photograph with you and your book.
Okay.
Well, thank you. I lose it. I lose. Okay. Well, thank you very much to talk with us, to share with us all the things that you made with this novel, and congratulations. And we are waiting for your second novel, and thanks a lot to share and your time with Atando Libros.
You're welcome. Thank you so much.
Well, see you soon. Thanks a lot.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.